Imagine a food so common you barely notice it. It is in your pasta, your ketchup, your pizza, your salad. Now imagine that for 200 years, the wealthiest people in Europe were genuinely afraid of it. They believed it was poison. They gave it a nickname that said so out loud: the poison apple. The food they feared this much was the tomato. And the strangest part of the whole story is that the thing actually killing people was never the tomato at all. To understand the fear, you have to start on the other side of the world, long before Europe had ever seen one. The tomato is not European. It grew wild in the Andes Mountains of South America, and it was tamed far to the north, in ancient Mexico, thousands of years ago. The Aztecs grew it, cooked with it, and gave it the name we still use. They called it tomato. For them, there was no mystery and no menace. It was simply food, red and ripe and good. Then the Spanish arrived, conquered, and shipped the strange new plant back across the ocean in the early 1500s. And that is where the trouble began, because Europeans did not see a harmless vegetable. They looked at the tomato and saw something that frightened them. The problem was its family. The tomato is a nightshade, and its close cousins in Europe were plants with terrible reputations. Deadly nightshade, which could kill. Mandrake, wrapped in centuries of witchcraft and superstition. To an educated European, the tomato looked like a relative of the most dangerous plants they knew. Worse, part of that instinct was correct. The leaves and the stems of a tomato plant genuinely are toxic. Nobody had yet worked out that the fruit was the one safe part. And then there was the color, that deep, glossy red, which in nature so often screams danger, warning, stay away. So Europe did a very cautious thing. It grew the tomato, but mostly it refused to eat it. For a long time, the plant was treated as a curiosity, an ornament in a garden, something pretty and foreign and best admired from a safe distance. It did not help that the tomato arrived as part of a whole wave of strange new foods from the Americas. The potato, maize, the chili pepper, all turned up in Europe at roughly the same time, and people eyed the entire lot with suspicion. A few countries did find a gentler story for it than poison. In France, it earned the name pomme d'amour, the love apple, and a reputation as a secret aphrodisiac. But a fruit rumored to stir up dangerous passions was hardly more welcome at a respectable dinner table than one rumored to kill you. Either way, the polite thing to do was leave it alone. The fear was made worse by the experts. In 1597, an English herbalist named John Gerard published a book about plants that became hugely popular and influential. In it, he declared the tomato poisonous. He called the whole plant foul-smelling and dangerous. And here is the maddening detail. Gerard actually knew that people in Italy and Spain were eating tomatoes quite happily and not dying. He wrote them off anyway. Because his book was so widely read, especially in England and its colonies, his mistake hardened into common knowledge. For generations, if you were English-speaking and educated, you simply knew that tomatoes were not to be trusted. The plant even picked up a sinister name. Botanists filed it under the label Lycopersicon, which means wolf peach, tangling it up with old fears of werewolves and dark magic. A beautiful red fruit had somehow become a monster. And for the richest households in Europe, that reputation was about to be confirmed in the worst possible way, by people who ate tomatoes and then genuinely fell ill. Here is where the story turns, because those aristocrats really were being poisoned. The tomato was simply innocent. The clue is in who got sick. It was the rich, not the poor. And the reason was sitting right in front of them on the table. Wealthy Europeans dined off beautiful pewter plates, and pewter in that era contained a great deal of lead. Lead is a slow, quiet poison. Normally, the plates were just about survivable, but the tomato is acidic, and when acidic tomato juice sat against a pewter plate, it pulled the lead straight out of the metal and into the food. The diners were poisoning themselves with their own expensive dinnerware, one fashionable meal at a time. Nobody understood lead poisoning back then, so when a nobleman ate a tomato dish and grew ill, the blame fell on the shocking foreign fruit, never on the elegant plate everyone had always used. The tomato took the fall for a crime the pewter committed. Meanwhile, the people who could have proven it safe were doing exactly that, quietly, every day. Poorer families ate off simple wooden boards in plain ceramic, which held no lead. They grew tomatoes, cooked tomatoes, and thrived. The fruit that was killing the wealthy was feeding the poor without a single problem. In a strange twist, the tomato was cleared of murder by poverty. Fashion eventually finished the job the poor had started. Pewter slowly fell out of style, replaced by cheaper ceramic and porcelain that carried no lead. And the mysterious tomato deaths simply stopped happening. Nobody at the time connected the plate to the poison. The fruit had been innocent the whole time, and now, quietly, the evidence against it was disappearing too. Nowhere embraced it faster than Italy. Italians took to the tomato with open arms and gave it a far kinder name than wolf peach. They called it pomodoro, the golden apple, which is why an Italian today still asks for a pomodoro. In the warm South around Naples, the tomato became the beating heart of the local cooking. And centuries later, it would sit at the center of the most famous food Italy ever gave the world, the pizza. The poison apple had become a national treasure. America, though, stayed nervous much longer, and this is where the tomato picked up its most famous legend. The story goes that in 1820, in Salem, New Jersey, a colonel named Robert Gibbon Johnson decided to end the superstition once and for all. He announced he would stand on the courthouse steps and eat a whole basket of tomatoes in public. A crowd gathered, so the tale says, half expecting to watch him foam at the mouth and drop dead. He ate the entire basket, and he simply stood there, perfectly fine. Now, historians think this dramatic scene is almost certainly a myth, invented and polished long after the fact. But the fact that America told this story at all shows how deep the fear had run, and how badly people wanted a moment where someone brave finally proved it wrong. Slowly, that is exactly what happened. The tomato won. It spread into gardens and kitchens everywhere, until it became one of the most planted, most eaten fruits on the entire planet. Which set up one last, wonderfully silly chapter. By 1893, tomatoes were such big business that the question of what a tomato even is ended up in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. The issue was tariffs. Fruits and vegetables were taxed differently, and a tomato is, botanically, a fruit. The court did not care about botany. It ruled, unanimously, that because people eat tomatoes with dinner and not for dessert, in the eyes of the law, the tomato is a vegetable. So the fruit that Europe once feared as deadly poison ended its journey being legally declared a vegetable by the highest court in America. From a monster in the garden to the taste of summer, hated, then feared, then finally loved. Every food has an origin story. This is Foodling.